What's up, everybody? My name is Chris Jones. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and the first person I want to see when I got to Toronto was Dr. Vibe. Been on his show before. I will be on his show again if he lets me. He's a great guy. I tell everyone to tune in, to download, to subscribe. You're going to learn some things. It's good for your mind, it's good for your heart, it's good for your body, it's good for your spirit. On and off the mic, he's a great guy. You got to check him out. My name's Chris Jones, all from Chicago. Peace and love.
Good morning, everybody. It is Dr. Vibe here, and as always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. I am the host and producer of the Dr. Vibe Show, the home of epic conversations, and the Dr. Vibe Show is the host of epic conversations. And as always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Excuse me, sorry about that. And I'm looking forward to an ongoing series of more conversations about men, for men, and for those who love men. And I'm so blessed to have Sat Purusha on the line with us from Spain. A little bit of a story. Sat and I were on a broadcast about 2 years ago for the goodmenproject.com. And then about 3 weeks ago, he reached out to me saying, you know what, I had a really good time on your conversation. Can I come back on, talk about some various stuff for men. So Sat is back. I am so happy that he's back, and he's going to be with us over the next little while, hosting different conversations about men. He is a writer for the goodmenproject.com, and he's also recently an editor now for the goodmenproject.com, and he's with us live today from Spain. So welcome to the Dr. Vibe Show, Sat Purusha. Welcome, Sat.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Vibe. It's great to be here. I'm so happy to be having these conversations with you again. I remember a couple of years ago when we talked, and I joined in some conversations through the Good Men Project, and I find it so stimulating to do this sort of live chat. I know I write a lot. I write a lot for men, and I write on the Good Men Project. But it's so helpful to be able to take what I write and then think about it and talk about it and have a conversation with someone. So I'm here. It's late afternoon. The sun's shining in Spain. It's where I live, down in the southeast corner. And it's great to be here talking to you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to share with myself, to the audience, about some important subjects coming into men's lives that they have to deal with on a daily basis. Before we get started, can you give a little background about yourself?
Yeah, I'm retired now in Spain, although I am a writer. As you say, I write, and I'm an editor for Good Men Project. I have my own website, which is grahamreedphoenix.com. And just to clarify, there may be some confusion over me having two different names. I was born with the name Graham Reed Phoenix, and it's the name I write under for men. But recently, during the last year, at the summer solstice, in fact, I changed my name to Sat Purusha. It's a Sanskrit name. Purusha refers to a universal consciousness. And it's about a shift that's happening in my life, not a shift to reject who I was, not to reject Graham Phoenix, but it's just to take on board a different way of life. I've spent my life in business as a lighting designer, both in the theatre and as an architectural lighting designer. I've run lighting design companies, and I've spoken and conducted events around the world. So now in retirement, I focus on men, very much from my own perspective. I was married for 30 years and was divorced. I have two sons who are now getting on towards their 40s, two grandchildren, and I'm married for a second time. So I have a lovely wife here, a Dutch wife, and we enjoy the beautiful sunshine and the peace and the quiet down here in Spain. So I love talking and I love writing, and my focus is about men. My focus is on the kind of life I've had and how I can use that to help men look at their own lives.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Before we get into the conversation, I'd like to know, when did you take it to the next level to start writing about men and talking about manhood subjects? Was there a moment or a few things that happened in your life saying, I need to share about?
Yeah, there was. It's about it's about 10 years ago that I got divorced. And I got divorced from a 30-year marriage. In fact, I'd been with my wife for 35 years. And I moved into a flat in my late 50s. I moved into a flat on my own. And I can tell you that was a very difficult experience. I'd literally never lived on my own. I'd always shared flats with people, or lived with someone, or lived at home with my parents. And there I was on my own, with no relationship and wondering what to do. I was still working, but I felt very, very alone in lots of ways. And the idea of dating was something that didn't really go with me. It didn't feel right for the kind of age I was. But I wanted to carry on living. It wasn't a time to give up. So I started going to events, but I started meeting women, and I started looking at what I was. And, in a way, my dating was very unsuccessful because I didn't really know how to do it, how to go about it. And then I met this lady who is now my wife. And, we were great friends, but she there was a point at which she said to me, look, Graham, you're very nice, but I don't need another girlfriend, thank you. She said, you're just not being yourself as a man. And that started me thinking. And I started thinking about who I was and who I wanted to be. And that just took me into writing about it, because I started getting insights about that the experience I was having was probably not unusual. And the more I got to know people, the more I talked to women around my age, and they were going, where are all the men? What's the problem with men? With men of your age, men who are single or divorced or whatever? Why are they so weak or woolly, or what's the issue? So I started thinking about that. So it was that shift in my own life that made me think about, well, how was I living my life, and what had happened in my life to bring me here? I thought I'd had a great life. I thought, marriage was it. I had 2 fabulous boys, but it just wasn't working out the way I wanted. So I started thinking about it. And since then, I've changed dramatically. I changed in the sense of, well, I certainly changed that my current wife, then girlfriend, shifted round and completely changed her opinion of me. And that was because of me. That was because I had decided to be a man. Now, there's a sort of controversial nature to that, talking to men about manning up and, finding yourself as a man is not always the best thing to do. It can be very prescriptive. It can be very wrong for men. But in my case, I found inside the core of me as a man and shifted into my strength, into my inner strength, to become the man I am today. And I love talking about it and writing about it. So that's a kind of brief background, and I'm sure more will come out as we talk.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing some of yourself, not only for other men out there, but those men and those who love them. Graham and I have had conversations over the last few weeks, and we presented a number of topics, or either conversation pieces that he'd like to discuss on the platform. And the first one he would like to talk about today is men and sexual abuse. So, Graham, why did you want to discuss and share about the topic of men and sexual abuse?
Well, there's 2 reasons. One is personal, and one is, if you like, very big picture. And the big picture one, very briefly, because we will come back into it in some detail, is there's certainly in the UK, there's a lot of scandals at the moment. And there's a very recent one in football, in British, I think what the Americans call soccer. In professional football, there's been a big scandal about the sexual abuse of young boys by coaches, and some young boys who have now become professional footballers. So that's a big thing that we could talk about. There's also been a continuing scandal in the UK of celebrities and sexual abuse. The biggest one was Jimmy Savile, who you may not know in America. Jimmy Savile was an entertainer, was a TV entertainer who was really, really popular and very popular with children. And he, throughout his life of really connecting with children through TV, through hospital visits and everything, was continually abusing children. And it was boys and girls, but it was, you know, he had no direction to go in. So those are big issues, and those are big issues concerning men that I'd like to talk about. But also it's a personal one that I actually wrote about this Friday on Good Men Project. And it was about an incident of mine in my youth when I was, I don't know, about 15, when I was picked up by a man who in a very minor way abused me. And the thing that intrigued me about that was not so much the event, which was pathetic, and the man was pathetic, and really he needed more help than condemnation. But it's the effect on me, and the effect on me was something that really concerns me. I turned into a very dominating man for much of my life, a very angry man. And one of the reasons, not the only one, but one of the reasons was that this event made me determined that I was going to control what happened to me. And in doing that, I ended up controlling other people. So in the end, although I didn't, you know, abuse anybody myself sexually, I did emotionally. I probably abused my wife and my children emotionally. And a lot of that came from what I suffered. So the two ends are both worth looking at and concern me deeply.
Graham, and I really appreciate transparency. It's fantastic. So I want to get deeper into this, and how comfortable you are is up to you. But that incident that happened to you at a young age, did you share that with anybody else at that time? And when you did finally share it, the party receive it, and how did you get to that point of sharing being sexually abused by another man?
No, I've never shared it until I wrote about it. I wrote about it first on my own blog about, I don't know, a year ago. And then I wrote about it on Good Men Project on Friday. Until that moment, literally nobody in my life knew about it. I've never shared it with anyone. And certainly at the time, I never said a word. I just kind of experienced it. And it was just that he picked me up and we were sitting in a cafe and he put my hand on his leg and something else was there, as you can guess. And it deeply affected me, but so much that I held it in. And my understanding from other people who've suffered abuse is that the common reaction is to hold it in, is to not say anything, because the common reaction is to think that you did something wrong. You know, I just felt that it was something in me that had attracted this man, that I was vulnerable, weak, and that I obviously looked it, which is why he came and picked me up.
What gave you the courage to finally share about this story?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's kind of been a process. What I've, in writing about men, and writing about my experience, I've slowly written more and more about my life. And the reactions have always been positive. So in the kind of 6 years or more of writing about my experience of things that have happened to me, things to do with sex, things to do with just being a man or not being a man, or whatever. And what I've always had is good reactions. So I've always been encouraged, not overtly, but just in the process of doing what I'm doing, I've always been encouraged to keep talking. Because not only have I been encouraged, but I've realized that I say things that help other people. And it's those ripples that make it worthwhile. So it's not about writing because, oh, I want to tell everyone about my life and aren't I great and or aren't I sad or whatever. It's because there are many, many other men out there who've been through the kind of experiences I've been through, who don't talk about it and think that there's something wrong with them, or think that they are inadequate, or that whatever reaction they have. And so those ripples that come back to me through conversations, through emails, encourage me to talk more. And it's not because, you know, it's great, my story being out there. It's because my story helps other men. I think in this latest post that I came out on Friday, I talked about the fact that I'm an average man. I talked about the bell curve, you know, and I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm a very ordinary average man. I'm a white man. I'm from a middle-class background. Other than that incident, I've not really had any serious abusive incidents. So I've had a fairly good middle-class life. I've earned money. I've had a business. So I'm the kind of man that there are a lot of men can relate to, a lot of ordinary men. And I find that if I open up, they can relate to me, but also it helps other men to open up. Not everyone, but there are men who, as a result, find the courage or the confidence to, you know, to open up and start talking.
And it's so great, and I'm of the same thought process that it all starts with one, and you were an individual who took the courage to say, I'm going to share a story. And I'm sure from what you've shared with us, you've heard many men share their story about this. So my question to you, or my conversation piece to you, is how prevalent is in society today? Is it a hidden fact? And how much awareness has it been brought to you by sharing your story and the response you've received?
Oh, it's very prevalent, and that's the big issue. Let me go back to Jimmy Savile and just Jimmy Savile's scandal was, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago. He's dead, and it only really came out after he died. He died, I don't know, quite old. And he'd been popular for years. I mean, when I was young, I used to watch him on television. My children used to watch him, and he was supremely popular. And he was popular as a child entertainer. And as a child entertainer, he used to volunteer at least once a week as a hospital porter. And he had access to schools and hospitals, to children's wards, to, you know, he was given free open access by the public at large, and particularly by the BBC. The BBC is, you know, the broadcasting corporation in the UK. And all his programs came out of the BBC, and they supported him enormously. Well, what happened was that continuously during his life, he was constantly abusing children, both boys and girls. But a lot of boys, you know, boys are very open. Prepubescent boys particularly are very open to this sort of abuse. So he was doing it right throughout his career. And the problem was that when the scandal finally went public, it turned out that obviously many, many people knew about this or suspected about this. But he was such a big figure in the entertainment world that nobody said anything. When people who were abused did say something, nobody believed them. They went, yeah, now, come on, this is Jimmy Savile, don't be silly. Why would he do such a thing? He's so big, he's so popular, he's such a, you know, well-known figure. He wouldn't possibly go there. And so they shut up. And the culture was one that people were quite frankly told to shut up. People who tried to report it weren't believed, weren't taken seriously. And so there's a whole culture then of not saying anything. And this has come out this last year, 2016, in football. Young boys joined football clubs to learn how to be footballers, and in many cases become professional footballers. And they were abused by their coaches, a lot of them. And again, if they tried to say anything, people said, oh, don't be so silly. Why on earth would they do that? Don't be stupid, you know. You're just trying to get attention. So and only now the scandals come out and professional footballers are saying, I was abused when I was young, and suddenly people are listening. And people are listening because people with strength and courage and respectability speak up. Not the children who are abused. They're never listened to. Children generally are not listened to. But it has to be adults, people like me, professional footballers, entertainers, people who have experienced this, step up and say, this is happening. And then people have to listen. And people don't want to listen. People don't want to know that they've been fooled all the time. And people don't want to acknowledge that they don't listen to children, that they suppress children, like men suppress women. You know, men don't listen to women, which is why the whole rape culture thing exists. It's a big issue. It's a very difficult one to pin down.
It is a very complex issue because, and I've had hosted conversations before about men being sexually abused, and one of the first conversations I had, there were women on there saying, really? That's real? And I can imagine for a man, whatever age, that's been abused, not only is it difficult for him to share it with public, not only is it difficult for him to share with other men, also difficult for him to share with women.
It's one of the most difficult things for a man to share is being abused, whether it's by a man or a woman. And, you know, abuse is carried out by women as well. But by far, I think the greatest percentage is man-on-man abuse. And the thing is that this is not homosexuality. Although the men who've experienced it, one of the reasons they hold it back is that they're frightened of being branded as a homosexual, as gay, when they're not and they don't want to be. But frequently the men committing the abuse are not gay either. This is not a, you know, I spent a lot of my life working in the theatre. Many friends of mine are gay, many men who are gay, and I have never experienced any issue from any of them. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with control. It's to do with control by inadequate men. And somehow there is some reason that, in fact, controlling other boys, other men, gives some men a bigger kick than controlling women, controlling girls. So that it's just not about sex. It's about inadequate men trying to control other people. And about the rest of society allowing them to do that. It's very interesting, you know, in the UK, there's been a great shift. There's anyone who now runs a football club or the Boy Scouts or in any way has children in their care has to go through a police check and has to be approved by the police. So there's an attempt now to track people who work with children and do something about this, but it doesn't stop it. It doesn't stop that desire to control and dominate.
I found it very fascinating. One thing everything you're sharing is very fascinating, but just in your most recent comment said that men get a better a stronger feeling. I don't know how to put it, when they have dominance over other men more than other women. Can you delve a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, women are, well, to some level, on average, women are physically a weaker sex. And particularly girls, young girls are weak in the sense that they find it hard, if not impossible, to fight back against men or to resist the domination of men, if you like. So there's a funny way, and I'm not talking from my experience, obviously, but my understanding is that it's less of a kick to dominate a woman. You know, it doesn't stop men doing it, but the men who are less interested in the sexuality of it, who are interested in making themselves feel that they are on top of things, on top of their life, on top of the world, find that dominating a boy and sexually abusing a boy is a bit more edgy and a bit more risky. They're out there working with boys is the other thing. You know, they're running football teams, they're running cub packs or scout packs, or they're teaching boys. And boys are quite tough. You know, boys will, I don't know what you were like as a boy, but I was a pretty rebellious boy. I would fight back. And so for a man to get over that and dominate that and pull this boy under his control, it's quite a strong thing. And it's horrible to say, but they get a kick out of it because they can't dominate adults, or they can't just be normal with adults. It's not even dominate. It's a lack of ability to lead a normal life, I suppose. I mean, that's the way I see it.
That's a great commentary. One of the things I'm thinking about here is how it's a lot of people. It's wired for many men to have control.
I'm sorry,
and it seems that it's almost a fine line between. I'm just saying that a lot of people will say that men are hardwired to be controllers, to be dominating, and it seems to be a fine line between domination and abuse, or control and abuse.
Yeah, control and abuse and domination. Sadly, I think you're right. Men are, if they're not hardwired, they're educated to be dominating. I mean, I talked earlier about me being quite a dominating man during my life. And a lot of that I got from my father. My father was a very loving man. He was never abusive, except that he was dominating. And so maybe from that perspective, he was emotionally abusive. And he got that from his father and so on. And I know that to some extent, I've passed that on to my boys. And it's partly just, you know, the way you grow up amongst boys. I went to an all-boys school. So until the age of 18, I was just spent most of the time among boys, 1,400 boys in the school. And, you know, you have to, it's not that you fight other people or you need to fight other people, but, you know, you need to hold your own against your peers, against the kids around you. If not, they'll push you down, they'll kick you, they'll, you know, dominate you. So although it's not exclusive to men, it is a big thing. You know, you can go back to the whole medieval thing, the whole hunter-gatherer. Men went out hunting, were there to dominate animals. And through that, they ran their families, they controlled the tribes. They always ended up being the leaders. I've always been a leader, you know, in trade unions, in professional associations, in my business. I've always ended up being in charge, and I feel that's typical for me as a man. But when men have that desire, if you like, but have no way of carrying it out, then the problem happens. So if they feel inside them a desire or a need to dominate, and they don't manage to do it with their friends at school, and they get kicked down or they get bullied, they take it out on other people. And classically, kids who are bullied bully younger kids, and it works its way through. I go back to what I was saying at the beginning. One of my reactions to the mild abuse that I got when I was young was to emotionally abuse other people, was to dominate other people. So it is hardwired, but it is changeable. And this is the difficult issue. How do you get men to change?
So let's build on that in regards to the education piece. And if you're transparent enough, let's look at how you were raised, the boy culture when you were a boy, compared to the boy culture of you raising your sons. How is that different, or did it differ in any way? And what did you learn from the way you were raised as a boy that affected how you raised your sons?
Yeah, my sons. Well, I'll tell the story. I mean, just briefly, when I was raised, I was the youngest of three boys. My father always had to have the last word, as did my two brothers. So in the household, the culture was you had to fight, if you like, to get the word in. So you had to fight domination by domination. Well, fast forward to some years ago when one of my sons was in his early 20s, and he's a drummer. He's a punk drummer. He's a very well respected drummer in the UK punk scene. And although his drumming and his music is very aggressive, in himself he's quite sensitive. And he was on tour, and his band had been playing one night, and they went to a club afterwards to have a few drinks. And he got into a fight with this guy. This guy came and started being rude to him, and he ended up fighting him and getting thrown out of the club. He got angry. He flipped and got angry. And he came home, and he came to talk to me, and he said, "Look, Dad, what's going on? Why do I suddenly get angry like that? What's happening, and what can I do about it?" So I just told him about me and about my experience with my father and how I had unknowingly passed on the anger to him. And my advice to him was just to understand that and just to let it go, to know that this is something that will happen. But the more he understands it, the less it will happen and the less it will dominate him. So he went away going, at least I understand where it comes from. I know what's happening. Well, I never did that with my father. So one of the differences was that he was able to open up to me the way I could never open up to my father. I was able to talk to him. And partly because I'd been writing about it. I've been writing about being angry, about my father's anger. So that I think the difference now is there's a lot more opportunity for kids to understand what's going on. There's a lot more they can read on the internet. They can come and read what I write. You know, my stuff is out there publicly, so my boys read it and can understand me better in ways that I never understood my father. And that's, you know, another background to why I write about things, because I think the more openness there is, the less it has to dominate people's lives. The more kids can open up to someone. For example, I had a coaching client of a guy in his early 30s, and he actually said to me at one point, he said, "This is quite extraordinary, the conversation we're having," because he said, "I have never in my life talked to a man of your age, my father's age." And he said, "This is so new for me to be able to open up and talk to someone who's had your experience in life." But the fact is he could do it, and he found me to do it. And that's the difference that kids have nowadays. You know, there's always going to be people out there dominating and taking advantage. But if they know it's out there, they're able to resist it better. Perhaps they're more confident to speak up so that people who do it are stopped earlier and prevented from carrying on doing this, unlike Jimmy Savile and the football coaches I've talked about.
Now I know you have a men's group that you speak with or you communicate with on a regular basis. How open is this subject talked about compared to men in general? So I know that you have a group of men that you speak with and you talk about these subjects. Are you beginning to see any change by men in general when it comes to talk about sexual abuse?
Interestingly, this itself is not a subject we've talked very much about. I'm in a group of 10 men around the world, in America and in Norway and the Czech Republic and Spain, and we meet every 2 weeks. We've done it for 3 years now. We meet online, and we just met on yesterday, and we were just saying, how much we get out of meeting, how it's like a group of guys meeting in the pub, having a beer. But the difference is it's not, because we talk openly about our lives, very openly. We go from my age, and I'm just a year short of 70, to the youngest member of the group is 20 years old, 21 I think he is now. And we're spread in between. We're like guys in the pub, but we don't sit and gossip or talk about football or stuff like that. We talk about what's happening in our lives, what our experience is. And then most of the men in the group actually work in men's work, like me. So they write, or they run groups, or they do coaching, or they have their own men's circles. So we're, as this group, our honesty and authenticity is allowing the ripples to go out. And that is, I trust me, it's very different from a group of men just, chin wagging over some beers on a Friday night.
That's excellent. And I tip my hat to you, or tip my bald head to you, having men's generational conversation. This is really fantastic, and we certainly believe and want more of this to happen based on conversation like this. And there's many other men's groups around the world that are doing that, and it's also part of what the Good Men Project is all about.
Absolutely.
With this subject, and what are some common themes or stories that you're hearing from men who have gone through this? Are there some common themes that you hear when you hear men sharing their story about being sexually abused?
Yeah, we've already mentioned one of them. One common theme is that men question their sexuality, and that in the stories that have come out, for example, about the professional footballers, is a very serious questioning of sexuality. So, for example, football is it's a very overt masculine sport, and only recently has it become acceptable for sportsmen like that to come out and be gay. So there's still, if you are gay, it's quite difficult to come out. But even worse is a man who isn't gay and doesn't feel he is, except that he has this feeling inside that he must be. Why would he attract a man? So that's a very serious one. There's nothing wrong with being gay, but there's everything wrong with questioning your sexuality when you really are a heterosexual male and you're trying to have a relationship with a wife or a girlfriend, and that relationship starts breaking up because you're not sure about your own masculinity, your own sexuality. So there's that one. There's then just the simple one of feeling ashamed of being dominated. I mean, it's really the shame in another man getting one over on you, if you like, dominating you, the shame that you can't control it or couldn't control it. to forget the sexual side of it, just in terms of a man's sense of his own certainty or strength, it knocks that out. And that is such a big issue for men. So, because the problem is that men generally have a bad reputation for domination. So men nowadays try and let that go. They try and be the kind of man who sees equality in society, sees equality with women, and is happy with that, and very much tries to live on an equal basis with his wife or girlfriend, but questions whether he could do that because he's frightened of the whole question of abuse, the whole question of domination. So he's not only frightened of the reputation that he loses by being dominated, but he then moves on to this third aspect, which he's frightened of dominating others. So he's frightened of dominating his wife or his children, his young children, if he has boys or girls, because his experience of abuse, he's frightened of doing it himself because, abused people abuse more often than others. So there's a weakness built in, which is unnecessary. So a man steps back and doesn't step up into leadership positions or into just showing his inner strength, his just inner being as a man. And that inner being isn't stronger than, for example, a woman, but it is a certainty, and a certainty that many women look for, a certainty certainly that many children look for in their father. And if they don't see it in their father, they lose it in themselves, both men and women, both boys and girls. So I've seen fathers who are completely weak. I've had coaching clients who just lose. They don't know how to ask for what they need, or how to say what they need, or how to even find out what they need. They don't know how to really understand themselves other than as a weak person, which usually they're not.
And it's so concerning because this has as you were sharing, it has a domino effect. It not only affects the man himself, but those around him, those who are close to him. If a man is going through this and can't have the courage to share this, it not only affects him, but affects everyone around him. And it's sort of like a domino theory, correct?
It is correct. And it's even worse because, this is a whole other subject, but men are increasingly not very good at hanging around the family and being there. And there's many, 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 many women who bring up the children on their own. They are single parent mothers, not because necessarily they choose to, but because the man doesn't hang around. So you get a lot of kids growing up without a father or without a male figure. And then often the ones who do grow with that grow up with a figure who's weak because he's been influenced and dominated and not found a way of working through it. And you can work through it. It's like, women have a really serious problem with rape and sexual abuse by men. And there are quite powerful organizations and groups and methods for women to deal with that and work with that. But there are less so for men, less so for boys. Somehow it's less accepted. Society as a whole doesn't like to think of men abusing boys. Not that it likes men abusing girls or women, but it's more hidden, it's more secret.
Let me ask him, what outlets can you suggest for a man that's going through this situation? Because obviously we have advanced a little bit in this area, that there's more outlets now compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago. What suggestions would you make to a man that has been sexually abused by another man or by another woman? What sort of suggestions or steps would you have for them to get out of this situation and move forward?
Well, in terms of men, one of the things I would strongly recommend is joining a group of men who deal with issues like this. So you can, the small scale groups and there's large scale groups. So there's men's circles, and you know, in many cities there are circles of men. There are now increasingly virtual circles of men who get together, 10, 12, 15 men on a regular basis, and create a sacred space that a man can talk about his past, the things that concern him. On a bigger scale, there's the Mankind Project, which is a very large organization based in America, where men go on weekends to, if you like, become initiated, and then end up in groups called I groups, which are groups that move on from the weekend and become a permanent group that the man's part of. So the essence is being with a group of men that you feel comfortable with and can open up and start talking. Because not everyone can do what I do and sort of write about it publicly and put it out there and find that way of working it out in myself. But groups of men, the interesting thing about the groups of men is that this is obviously quite difficult and edgy for many men who've been abused in their childhood by other men, because that's where they're perhaps most afraid. That's perhaps the thing they're most afraid of doing, is getting amongst a group of men. So somehow the act of doing it does so much before even opening up and talking. And it is, and you can have, there's plenty of coaches out there who will deal with it. There are coaches who specialize in sexual abuse. There are coaches who specialize in sexual matters. I mean, if the results are, you know, performance problems or dysfunction, which often can be the result, there are people there who will deal with that. But however it is, it's finding the courage somewhere along the line to talk to someone. And it's that strength inside yourself to talk to someone, even if it's only your wife or a parent or just somebody like me, you know. And unless you talk to someone, it never comes out. It remains repressed. And many of our issues as men and women, our issues of anger and domination, etc., come from things that are repressed inside, things that we push down, things that we ignore and hope will go away. And guess what? They don't.
It's a good point. And, you know, I do agree that the work that the Mankind Project does is very good work. One of the regular contributors I've had on the Dr. Vibe show is a gentleman named Glenn Barker from the Mankind Project Chicago. And I know they do fantastic work, and I appreciate how you provided suggestions from a macro and a micro on how a man can approach it. And it all starts with the man himself. He has to break that chain
He has
that's around him. And I think that's the most difficult step, just making that initial chain breaking.
It is, but somewhere along the line, I don't believe that in any man who's suffered this, that the memory goes away, that you forget about it, that it ceases to be important. You know, mine was a relatively minor experience, but it's never ceased to be important. I've come across this issue in quite surprising ways. I was a lighting designer for many years, and one of my big areas of work was in cathedrals and churches. And I was doing a project which was lighting a Catholic church in Ireland, just an ordinary parish church. And I was sitting with the priest, just talking about what we were going to do to the church interior. And he was having all this building work done in the sacristy area behind the church. And I said, you know, oh, what are you doing? It was just in conversation, you know, what's happening? Oh, he said, you know, because of the whole scandal and, you know, something we haven't touched on is the whole scandal of the Catholic Church and priests and abuse. He said, we're having to build a separate room for choir boys to use as opposed to the men in the choir. And in the confessional, you know, where I receive people to take confession, we're having to replace the door with a glass door so that people can see in. He said, the issue is so big now. He said, in the church, we can't ignore it. And we can't ignore it where it's not happening. You know, I've never had any problems in my church, but I'm having to build a separate room. I'm having to put glass on the doors so that although people can't hear what I'm saying, they can see whether I'm getting up to something. And he was very open in talking about it. And I respected him for that. And the more we can move that culture, that it's dreadful that we have to provide separate rooms, except that that's what we have to do. Everybody has to know that this is a genuine possibility, that any man, and that includes me and you, can do this. And if we are working with children, with young children, people have to be aware that we're doing that, and that we have to be open and clear about what's going on and what's happening.
Excellent. What other challenges what are some of the challenges you feel to get this message out to a larger audience? Because you're doing it on your own. Are there other challenges that you see out there? How can they be overcome to get this message out to a wider audience?
Well, one of the challenges that's being dealt with is the challenge of people speaking up. So, I mean, it sounds terrible, but one of the advantages of the very public scandals, like the football scandal in the UK over the last year, it just started the floodgates. It just started with one man, one professional footballer who spoke up, and he said, this happened to me. And it turned out that the coach who did it had already been to court and was in prison for it. But he came out publicly talking about it, and suddenly the floodgates opened up. And that was fine. That was there for a while. For a matter of weeks, there were stories in the newspapers, stories online. And then they disappear because people, they kind of are tired of it, or they don't want to hear about it anymore. So the challenge is keeping the channel open, continuing to talk about it, and not going, oh, well, that scandal's come out, they've made this change and that change. You know, in the church, they put glass doors in the confessional, so it's okay. No, it's not. We have to challenge people. As an ordinary person, we have to actually take the risk. And by ordinary person, I mean people who have not either abused or been abused, have to accept that it's a reality, and they need to be willing to talk about it at dinner parties, in the pub, in letters to the newspaper. And they have to be willing to read about it in places like the Good Men Project or on other blogs. So I do my little bit to fight that challenge by talking about it when it's not news, you know, just because it's there, and people have to can't forget it. The moment you forget it, the moment you as a society push it back, it grows again. You know, unfortunately, I'd like to think we could get rid of it. I don't know the answer to that. And so the alternative is that if we keep vigilant about it, we can pull it back, we can reduce it, we can make it so that culturally men stop and think before they go there and stop doing it. And just a final thing on this.
Excellent. You know what? Oh, go ahead.
You know, I was just going to make a final remark that is very important. You know, people have a big thing in the UK about paedophiles, about men who love children. And that's a big issue. But this is not that. This is just ordinary boringly ordinary men taking advantage of people in their care. And as long as we refuse to realize that it's ordinary men doing it, then we'll find it difficult to accept it.
Well, Sat, on that note, we'll end off our first conversation. I'd like to say thank you so much from wonderful Spain for taking time to share with us this morning. And for all the audience that's watching either live or on the replay, we're going to be doing this on a regular basis. I think we're looking at the first Saturday of each month. And that is going to be great. And could you give any final thoughts and contact information where people can reach you?
Yeah, the simple way that people can reach me is, well, the simple way is on Twitter, which is I'm Graham R. Phoenix, or on Facebook. My personal Facebook page is Sat Purusha. But if you look for Graham Reid, and that's spelled R-E-I-D, Phoenix, you'll find my page and you can message me from there. Alternatively, you can read my stuff on grahamreidphoenix.com, which is my blog. Or if you go to Good Men Project, just search for Graham Phoenix as an author and you can find 40 odd posts that I've written, many about these kind of subjects. But I'm there. Twitter or Facebook are the easiest ways to get in touch with me, and I'll always respond. Whatever it is you want to talk about or guidance on, or you just want to tell me what you think.
Excellent, Sat. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'm really excited about the ongoing conversations we're going to have. Yeah. And again, he does answer everything, folks. So message him. He will respond. Even though he's in Spain, he still responds. So look forward to more conversations. I'm Dr. Vibe. Yeah, I'm Dr. Vibe. I'm the host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I am the host of Epic Conversations. If you want to get in touch with me, there's the three best ways. There's Twitter at DRVIBESOW, website address www.thedrvibeshow.com, and also email dr.vibe@thedrvibeshow.com. Also note that I'm a certified empowerment coach and I'm president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching Communications. Big shout out to goodmen.com. Thank you for your support and in this event, and we look forward to more conversations. So as always, I like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles and you're a solution for someone's problem. God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and always remember, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Sat, have a great day. Chat with you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
What's up, everybody? My name is Chris Jones. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. And the first person I want to see when I got to Toronto was Dr. Vibe. Been on his show before. I will be on his show again if he lets me. He's a great guy. I tell everyone to tune in, to download, to subscribe. You're going to learn some things. It's good for your mind, it's good for your heart, it's good for your body, it's good for your spirit. On and off the mic, he's a great guy. You got to check him out. My name is Chris Jones, all from Chicago. Peace and love.